Hi all, this is Deepak. Hope you all are doing well. Today in this video we are going to cover a very interesting topic which is like how to build application with Crud REST API in Java using Spring Boot, MySQL, PostgreSQL and H2 database. So herein we are going to create a Spring Boot application which are going to connect with different databases based on which profile is activated. So basically we are going to connect with different databases like MySQL, PostgreSQL and H2 database, and we are also going to cover the CRUD operations or CRUD implementation. The points which we are going to cover in sequence are like first we will create a database in MySQL and PostgreSQL database. So in H2 database we are not going to create a database because it's an embedded database and in-memory database. For that, like, the database and table will get created automatically. For table creation in MySQL and PostgreSQL database, so we are not going to create table manually. Rather, we are going to create the entity object, and based on that, like, the table will get created automatically on our application startup. So we are going to use the Hibernate DDL auto update attribute, which we are going to configure. With this, like, it will create the tables automatically based on how we have designed and uh, implemented our entity object. Next point, like, in that we are going to create a Spring Boot application, and herein we are going to configure the database related attributes in our application.yaml file. So herein we are going to configure all these three databases like H2 database, MySQL database and PostgreSQL database in a single application.yaml file. So herein we are going to use Spring Boot provided multi-support YAML or application feature in order to connect with the multiple databases based on the profiles. Like, we are also going to configure the different profiles for different databases. So next thing, like, we are going to implement the CRUD operations with REST API, and we are going to cover the endpoints like get, post, update and delete methods. So finally, we will test our REST APIs using Postman, and we will verify the response data in Postman as well as in actual database. So herein, like, we are going to create the different profiles which are going to connect with different databases. Like, for the dev profile is going to connect with H2 database. Likewise, the QA profile is going to connect with PostgreSQL database, and similarly, prod profile will going to connect with MySQL database. So all these things we are going to configure in our application.yaml file accordingly. Accordingly on basis of what profile is activated, so respective database our application will connect with, and we will test our REST APIs using our Postman. So this is about all the introduction on the points which we are going to cover in this video. So let us start with our first point, which is like create our empty database in MySQL and PostgreSQL. So let me open the pgadmin in order to create the database in PostgreSQL. So herein we need to provide a password which we have set at the time of installation. Let us create the database with name as in customer master and save it. So we can see the database customer master is created with all the default folders and options available for the default database. Here we have schemas. Inside that we have public folder. Inside that we have various options like aggregates, collations, domains and FTS related options. And apart from that we have functions, materialized reviews, operator, procedures, sequence, tables, triggers, types and views. Okay, so inside that, like, we have table, and if you want to manually create any table, you can simply go it here and click on table option, and here in, like, you can give the table name, and here are the columns. Like, here you can give the column name, like, let's say here customer ID, here you can choose like begin set as a primary key. Next you can add like a name, and here you can set as a name character varying, which is like similar to varchar, and here you can mention the length. For that you can make it as a not null. And next you can add like a address for that customer. You can again like uh, set the data type as a character varying, mention some length and make it as not null. And finally you can set as in, let's say, department, and here again you can set a character varying 255, and here you can make it as a not null. With this, once you save this, the table will get created in the database. Okay, but herein like we are not going to create a table manually, rather we are going to create let our application create it for us by using our entity object. We want to close it. So here like, so this is the manual process with which you can create. And in real practice you should create the tables, database and tables first for any database, and then let our application connect with our database. With that, like, we can reduce any data loss, or in case by mistake if our application creates a new database with the same name, then we can lose our existing data in the same database or tables. So that risk is there. So it is always better to create the tables on database first, and then let our application connect with the respective database or table. So with this, like, we are done with our database creation for PostgreSQL. Similar way, we can create a database for our MySQL database. Let me open the exam control pane, with which we can. This provides interface to create a MySQL database. So let me start the Apache server. Next, we can start the MySQL server. Here we can see the state of this is running. Let me start it again. Okay, now state is running. So for creating a database or tables for MySQL, we can use the, here is like MySQL workbench as well, or you can use the exam control panel. So either will do fine. Now here we can see the MySQL server is running. We can click on admin. With this, like, it will give us the interface wherein we need to enter the username, password and login. Once we are logged in, so herein we have various options. Like here you can see the existing databases are present. Now we can create a new database using this new option. You can name your new database. Let's say I can put the customer master, and I can say create a database. We can see the database, new database with name customer master is created. Fine. So with this, like, we have created the empty database in MySQL and PostgreSQL. As I told you, for H2 database, as it is an embedded in-memory database, so we can declare the database name into the properties file, and our application will create that database automatically. Next thing, like, we will create our Spring Boot application and configure the database related attributes in that. So let me create the Spring Boot application first. So herein you need to specify which is the workspace, and you can click on launch. With that, like, it will create the default project folder. No, like, it will simply launch our STS. Now here you can see on the right side pane we have different options to create a Java Spring Boot project. We can choose the third option, which is like create new starter Spring Starter project. Herein we can name our project like, let's say, customer hyphen service, and here, like, we can select Maven as a build type, packaging as a jar, and Java version as a 17 as the latest one, and we can say group ID, group as in com.customer, artifact name customer hyphen service. Here we can mention this is like it's an customer service with Spring Boot. Here we can mention our package as in com.customer. Once everything is done, you can just verify it once and click on next. Herein we need to add all the required dependency. First we will add Spring Web. Next we can add Spring Data JPA. Next we can add our, now here we need to add MySQL driver. Again we are going to connect with the H2 database, so we need to add H2 database dependency, and we need to add the PostgreSQL driver as well, because we are going to connect with PostgreSQL as well. Finally we can add a Lombac dependency for setter getters or all. So with this, like, we have added all the required dependencies. Now we can simply click on next button, and we can click on finish. We can see it has created the default project folder with default folders and files. You can simply open the form.xml file and verify what all dependencies we are added. Inside, under dependencies, we can see first is our Spring Data JPA. With this, like, we can create an entity and repositories, and we can make use of existing annotations for that. Next, with starter web, like, we can create our stereotype component or the, like, a REST controller or service, and we can make use of various REST API related annotations like get mapping, post mapping, patch mapping, and delete mapping. And again, like, we can make use of other annotations like path variables, request body, response entity kind of, and there are many other annotations. With this H2 dependency, we can connect with the H2 database. With this driver, MySQL driver dependency, we can connect with MySQL database, and with this PostgreSQL driver dependency, we can connect with PostgreSQL database. With Lombac dependency, we can remove the boilerplate code, and we can make use of existing annotations like, let's say, we have all argo constructor, no arg constructors like builder, and again, like, we have data annotations, and there are many other annotations. We can make use of getter setters. So all these annotations we can make use of using this Lombac. That's it about the dependencies. Now what we can do, we can simply build our application just to check, like, if we need to remove or add anything so that it will be successful. We can say that our build is successful. Now let us configure the our database related attributes first. So what we can do, we can create one YAML file and simply copy this, paste, and we can name it as an application YAML. Save it. Now we can delete this properties file. We can use the application.yaml or properties file. So we can start adding the entries within this, like first entry Spring application, next like name, and here next thing like so first thing we will change the server, we will change the server port. Default port is 8080, so we can make it 8081, and now for our so herein we are going to use the multi-support YAML or application YAML or properties feature provided by Spring, now Spring Boot. So herein we can mention our first Spring config and activate. Here we can mention on profile, and for profile we can mention as a div. First is a div. So for div profile we are going to use H2 database related properties. So what we can do, we can change the port number as well for H2 database. Let's say server port, and here we can mention 8082. Similar, instead of dot can use 8081. So for our H2 related configuration we are going to use 8082, and here is on profile as a div. Next thing like we can configure our database related attributes. Let's say data source dot spring dot data source URL we need to mention, and here we can say jdbc colon h2 colon main colon. Herein we can mention our database, actual database. Let's say customer and underscore master. Next we can use username. We can use username as an user1, password as an user1 at the rate 123. We can use similar username or different username for different databases as per we want. Next we can use like let's say Spring JPA. There is a show hyphen SQL. We can make it as an true. With this, like we can see the SQL prepared or formed runtime in our console. Next thing, like we can add, so we can add for H2 database specifically, we need to add one more property like let's say ddl auto as an update, because we are going to create a tables. Next thing, like we are going to use like Spring H2, and here like we can say console, we can use enabled as a true. With this, like we are going to use the interface of H2 database, and with that we can see the tables created inside H2 database. So with this, like we have added all the required H2 database related properties. Now let us add like name as an, let's say, H2 YAML. Next, environment we can add as an, let's say, div, and here we can add enabled as an true. So with this, like we are done with our H2 database configuration part. Now let us add for our Postgre related attributes. You can copy it. Here we can change the server.port, and here like we are not going to use it for is Postgre related attributes, so we are not going to use it. Here profile we are going to use as an QA for Postgre. We can cross check it once. For Postgre it's a QA. And here we need to change this URL, like it's a JDBC MySQL, and we can say it's on localhost 3307. No, for Postgre is 54. No, it's a Postgre, so we need to add PostgreSQL and localhost 5432. This is the port, default port we have mentioned at the time of installation. So the same we can use, or if you have changed this port number, then you can use that other changed port name it here based on how what port name you have mentioned. This is the URL JDBC PostgreSQL, or customer master is our database, and you can use the same username or different username password attributes. And we are not going to change anything for JPA. Now next thing, like here we can mention it as an, instead of H2 it's an we can say QA. No, it's related to the MySQL. Okay, so it's a QA YAML we can say, or based on the profile we can change it. Like here again, like we can say dev YAML, it's a QA YAML, fine, and here we can change it as an QA. So with this, like we are done with our PostgreSQL related configuration. Next we can add our MySQL related configuration part it here. So we need to change the profile as an uh, this is our prod, and here we can change it as an MySQL, and here we can use our port number, and this is the database we have created. So why I have given this 3307, because we can go to our MySQL config and open this my.ini. Inside that you can find the port, go to port. You can see here we have mentioned as in port 33307. The same port you need to mention it in configuration file. So we have mentioned that. Username and password you can use the same one, or you can mention the different one. Here we can change accordingly. Instead of QA it's a prod YAML, environment is a prod, and that's it, enabled as it. So first time, like we can enable this dev environment as a true, by default, and for we can make this QA and production as a false, enabled as a false. And here we need to change the port as well, so here we can make it as a 8084. So with this, like, we are done with our database configuration related part. Now what we have done, we have configured all the three databases, like along with the profiles. So next thing, like, we will start implementing our CRUD operations. Yes. So second point we are done with. Now we will start implementing our CRUD operations. First we can check, like, we can build it. We can see our build is success with this properties file as well. Now, in order to implement the CRUD operations, what we can do, we can first create the different packages. Like, let's say first is the entity, next is a repository, next is a service package, and finally we will create one more package with the name as an controller. So we have created all the required packages, like entity, repository, service, and controller. Let us add the respective component or classes inside that. First, we can create a customer entity. We can add required annotations like entity, data, all constructors, all our constructors, builder, and finally we can add table, and inside table we can declare the name of the table as an, let's say it's an customer table, and we can add the imports for this one. Next we can add all the fields inside this one, let's say private long customer ID. Next thing, we can add private string name. We can add two more columns like address, and next like department, and we can save it. With this, like, we are done with our customer. So before we complete, we need to add the ID annotation for primary key. Again, we need to add our generated value. Herein we need to define the strategy with, like, it's an generation type dot. Here we can make use of auto identity or sequence. For now we are going to use the sequence, and here we can mention as an generator name, let's say customer generator. Next we can add one more annotation like for sequence generator. Herein we can mention name. We can give the same name as it here, and here we can add one more thing like sequence name. We can generate sequence name as in customer is sequence underscore seq, and we can add one more attribute as an allocation size as 1. With this, our customer ID will get incremented by 1 every time we add the customer object into the database. And that ID will get incremented on basis of this customer sequence, which will get created automatically on our application startup. Fine. So we are done with our entity part. Now let us create the repository. With repository interface, we can say it's a customer repository. Then we can add the respective annotation for repository. This repository implements, not implements, it should be extends, because it's an interface. Extends, you can say Crud repository. Here we need to add our entity and data type of our ID. You can save it, and we need to add input for customer entity. That's it. We are done with our repository part. Next thing, like, we can create our service component. First we can create a service interface with name as an customer service, and inside that we can add all the required methods which need to be added. Let's say it's a first it will return all customers with name as in get all customers. Next method we can add for getting individual customer on basis of what customer ID is passed. So we can change the method name as a get customer, and here we can pass our customer ID. Next thing, like, we can add method for adding the customer. We can name it like add customer. Here we can pass the input customer object which need to be added in database, and finally it will return the added customer from the database. Next we can use update customer method. For updating the customer we need to pass the input customer object, modified customer object which need to be updated, and again like customer ID we need to pass. But herein, like, we suppose that we have already modified the we have taken the customer object on basis of customer ID, modified it at controller level, and this modified customer object we are getting, which we are going to save into the database, and its return type is updated customer. Next thing, like, what we can do, we can add for delete customer, and here we are passing the customer object which need to be deleted, and the return type of delete customer, it should be a string, because the delete method on repository is not returning the object, rather it is returning the void method. Okay, so we are done with this interface part. Now we can create one class in order to implement all these interface methods. We can name it like customer service IMPL. We can annotate it using the service annotation, and this class will implement our customer service interface, and we need to provide implementation for all the methods which are declared inside this interface. Okay, so we have added all the required methods in our customer service implementer class. Now we need to provide implementation for all those one by one. First we need to inject our repository part it here inside repository, inside service. So let's say it's a customer repository. We are going to inject into the service, because we are going to call the repository methods to get the data into the service layer. Now you can call the respective methods on the repository. Let's say for getting all the customers, we can call find all. The find all method is returning like it's an iterator customer, so we can cast it to the list of customers. Next thing, like we can add for getting the customers, we can use find by id, long id, and which is returning as an optional. So this is returning as an optional customer, so in order to get the exact customer object, we can call the get method on that. Next thing, for adding customers, we can make use of customer repository dot set entity save entity. Herein we can add our customer object, input customer object, and then this object will get saved into database, and which will return the updated saved object as a return type. Next, we can call the update method. For updating methods, we can call again the save entity, and here we can save the updated customer object into the database. And finally, we are going to add the delete customer method. So we are going to call the delete customer. Here we are going to pass the customer entity which need to be deleted. So here in like the delete method is returning as a void, so we need to prepare some string and return it. So on successful deletion, we need to return some success message like customer is deleted successfully for customer id. Let's say we can add, and we can say customer dot get customer id. Fine. Now for this method get customer, we are passing the customer id, and accordingly we are getting the respective customer. So for this, like whenever we pass this customer id, we may or may not get the customer object for that given customer id. If we did not get any customer object in database for the given customer id, in that case we need to handle the proper exception, or either we can catch the exception or throw the exception. But in this video we are not going to handle any exception code. Rather, we are just considering the healthy path scenario. We are considering that for the given customer id, we are getting the customer object from the database. Fine. Next thing, like we can create our controller with name as an customer controller. We can annotate it using race controller. Next, we can inject our we need to inject our service at controller level, so that we can call our service methods from the controller. Now we can start adding our actual endpoints. We can make use of get mapping first. Here we can add the endpoint which we are going to use with name as a /customers. Next, we can add the method, let's say, which is returning the list of customer, and here the method name is like get all customers, and here we are going to call the method on this customer service. Let's say it's an return, and on customer service we have method like So we need to first add this list, then customer object entity. Now we can call the get all customers method, which is returning the list of customers. Fine. So what we are done with our first endpoint with name customers, which is returning get all customers, which is returning as a list of customer. So instead of returning the object like list of customers, it is always better to return the response entity, because response entity has an advantage to set the response status code or the actual response object, as well as the headers in that. So it is always better to use the response entity instead of just returning the object. With this, we are done with our first endpoint for getting all customers. Next thing, like we can add for getting individual customer based on what customer ID we are passed. So for that, the return type is just a single customer object or individual customer object, and this is like method name we can change get customer. For this, we need to add path variable, and we need to, let's say, we need to pass customer ID. It's a long customer ID, and here we can call our existing method on service for returning an individual customer with name get customer, and we can pass this customer ID. You can say the get customer is available for getting the individual customer. So this is about the second endpoint with name as an get customer, which will be returning the individual customer. Next endpoint we can add with name, like this is for adding the customer. So we can change the method HTTP method with post mapping, and here we don't need to pass the ID, rather we need to pass the actual request object using the request body, and here we need to pass our customer object. Here customer object, and we can call the respective add method on service, and we need to pass this input customer inside this method. We need to provide the input for post mapping. That's it. So we are done with our post mapping as well. You can see we have this add customer method available on the service. Yes, all these methods are available, and we are going to call that from the controller level. Next thing, like we can add method for updating the customer. So here for updating the customer, we are going to use patch mapping, and next, like we are going to change the method. So for adding the customer, we need to change the method as an add customer. For updating the customer, we can use method as an update customer. We can name it like update customer, and here also we are going to call the update customer from service. And for updating the customer, we need the customer object as an input, as well as we need the customer ID against which that object need to be modified. So we can add this customer ID. Here is our actual customer object which needs to be updated against this customer ID. So here our customer will get updated, but before that, first we need to get the customer. We can call this method to get the customer for existing customer ID it here, let's say. With this we will get the existing customer object from the database. Herein we can check if updated customer is not equal to null, then we can set the name, and here is our input object, and we can get name from input object and set it to our object which we have returned from the database. Next thing, like we can set two more fields like set department and get department from the customer ID. So next thing, like we can set address, and we can get address from this customer object which is the input object, and set it to the our updated customer object. Finally we can add this updated customer, pass this updated customer to our service layer method update customer, and finally it will return the updated object as a return type which is a customer. So we are done with our patch method or update customer method. Finally we will add our delete customer method. For that we are going to use delete mapping, and here we can change the method name accordingly. Delete customer. For deleting the customer we don't require the actual delete or object, rather the customer ID is enough. Using the customer ID we can retrieve the customer object which need to be deleted. This customer object we are going to delete. Here next what we can do, we can call this, we can check it first. If this object is not null, then go for deletion. Like we can call the method on our service which is like delete customer, and we can pass this object to be deleted. So herein we can prepare some message with a name, string name like response message. This service object service method is going to return some string, let's say on successful deletion it is going to return this string. So we need to accommodate that string into our this string object, and finally we can return our response message which will get set on post deletion the customer object. We need to change this data type as a string because we are going to return the string, and here we need to add dot OK. So with this, like we are done with our Crud implementation part. Save it. I have just formatted it. Now we can check. So with this, like we are done with our Crud implementation with the REST API part. Now let us test the REST APIs using profiles and the databases, different databases. For that, like first let me build our application because we have added a lot of code in this. Okay, so for let me change it. For update method we need to pass the customer ID. For patch mapping as well as for delete mapping we need to add it because we are passing as a customer ID as an input. So let us rebuild it. We can see the build is success. Now we can run it. For running the application, now we need to choose the run configuration part, because for running the application here we can use new configuration, and here we can choose. So here what we are doing, inside Spring Boot application we are creating a new configuration. You can choose the customer service project. Here we can click on search, it will give you the option, and this customer service application as a main type you can select. And herein we can add which profile we want to run. First we can add the dev profile. On basis of what profile we are going to pass, accordingly it will configure the database part. So let me run it. Till the time I will show you. So our profile is dev, which is connecting to H2 database, and here we can say it's an dev profile connecting with H2 database. Okay, fine. Now what we can do, we can open the Postman. You can see here it has created the customer table and the customer sequence for us. Okay, so as here for H2 database we have enabled okay, console we have enabled. So we are using the 8080 uh, let's say 8080 as an port. So we can simply open the console and check, let's say localhost 8082 hyphen h2 console. Yes, we can see. Now we can use the password which we have set for this h2 database, which is like user1 at the rate 123, user user1 at the rate 123. We can connect it. It's an user1 at the rate 123. Customer master, no, it's in product. We need to change it, like it's in customer underscore master. Now we can use user1 at the rate 123. Yes, we are able to connect successfully to H2 database. Here is our, we can say, customer master database. Inside that it has created customer table with columns like customer ID, address, department and name. And here is the sequence, customer sequence it has created. So if we go to our customer entity, what we have done, like we have used this customer table we have mentioned, so accordingly it has created the customer table. You can cross check, it has created customer table. So first let me go to YAML file. Herein what database we have mentioned, accordingly it has created the customer master database first, it here. Next it has created the customer table as we have mentioned into the entity object with this name. Next we have mentioned as a customer sequence for generating the sequence for the customer ID. So accordingly it has created the sequence with name customer sequence, and it has created all the required columns which we have mentioned into the our entity object. That's it. Now let us test it using Postman. First we can call our customers. For getting all the customers 8082, let us cross check the port number what we have mentioned about H2 database. And you can see here we have started the dev, we have passed the dev as an profile, and here it is showing the message the following one profile is active, which is Dave, which is as expected. Now what we can do, we are going to use 8082 as a port here, and this is the endpoint which we are going to call, because that is what we have mentioned it here. It's an customers, for getting all the customers. Now we can simply click on send. Right now it is showing the empty array returning, because we have not added any uh, customer. So let's say we can add with customer. So we have a name, and here address, let's say we can say Pune, department as an electronics, and we can simply add this customer. Let us see what happens. We can see the customer is added successfully with the given entries. Now we can add one more customer with name, let's say Sandeep as a name, address as an Mumbai, and department as an IT. Let us add one more customer. We can see the customer is added by sequence. One a customer is getting added with customer ID 1, next customer ID as a 2. So if we go back and see the get method, we can see there are two objects which we have just created. Fine. We can cross check in now actual database. We can see we can run this select query, and we can see we have two records. It is showing the two records we have just added. So next thing, like we can do the patch method. For here, like we can copy our second object. For patch method, we need to pass the actual object. We are just passing it here, and we need to pass the customer ID against which the object need to be updated. Now let's say here, instead of Sandeep, we can add uh, Santosh, and here instead of Mumbai we can add Bangalore, and here we can see IT department IDs, and we can click on send. With this, like it should, we can see the update is successful. Now we can check on by calling the get method. We can see we have updated the Sandeep to Santosh and Mumbai to Bangalore. This is successfully updated. We can cross check it once in database by running the select query. We can see the record is updated. Finally, we can call our delete method, and here for deleting the record, just customer ID is enough. So we are just passing the customer ID, and the method is delete. So we can see here the customer ID, customer is deleted for customer ID 2. So we can call the get method and check. Yes, we can see now there is only single record, because the second customer ID we have deleted. And you can cross check in the database as well. We can see it is as expected. Now it is showing only one entry. So the point here, you need to understand, every time you are going to call the uh, endpoint, you need to select the respective HTTP method. For getting all customers, we are going to use get. For adding the customer, we are going to use post HTTP method. For updating the customer, we are going to use patch, and for deleting, we are going to use delete HTTP method. So you need to make sure that. So again, we have written one more API, which is like returning the individual customer on basis of what customer ID we are passing. Let's say here it is returning an array, here list of customers. Now if we pass if we want a single customer, if we want to get, so we need to pass the customer ID, and it will return the customer single customer ID instead of whole array. So it will give us a particular customer object as expected. So that's it about the testing of our H2 database. Now next we can call activate our QA profile and connect with the PostgreSQL database. So let me stop this to activate our QA profile. So let me add QA here, apply and run. we can see it here, like now the profile QA is active, and action query metadata. So let us check in it here. Okay, so let us add the dialect part it here. So it is not getting the dialect. Let us check. To add the dialect, we need to add Spring JPA Hibernate, and here we can inside JPA we can add or we can add Spring. This is our QA database Postgre. We can add Spring, let's say data source, database, and inside database we can add, so not inside it here, we need to add inside JPA. Here is the database platform we can add, and here we can make like how dot hibernate dot dialect dot PostgreSQL dialect we can make use of. Okay, let us check now. Maven install. Let us run with run configuration, and we have changed it to QA so that it will point to our, it will activate the QA profile, and the QA profile will connect with our PostgreSQL database. We can open it. Let us check. So customer master database is there, and inside schemas so somehow the customer sequence is not getting created. Let us check customer sequence, and let us save it. We can rerun it. Let us check by building it. Put. Okay, so actually what we need to do, we don't need to create the sequence it here. We can delete this. Actually we need to pass some, because what happens, like we have this customer id which has I as a camel case, and on database side it is creating the columns which are not a camel case as such. So in order to accommodate this and solve this, we need to add one more property inside Hibernate, inside which is like spring JPA Hibernate. Inside this we can add one more property as an naming implicit strategy. We can pass as an all.hibernate dot, this is like implicit naming strategy legacy JPIMPL. And next we can add physical strategy as an physical naming strategy standard IMPL. With this, like what it will do, if our entity object properties are different from database the data columns created in database, it will accommodate that, or it will not give error on that part, on in that case. So let us check what will happen now. So let me add the same property for our MySQL as well, so that we will not face any error similar to this one. We can save it and we can build it. We can see our build is success. Now we can run using run configuration, and this is our profile QA. We can run it. You can see QA profile is activated. Okay, enable JDBC connection for DDL execution with user1 action for DDL execution authentication. Okay, so herein we need to pass the actual username which we have used for PostgreSQL. So the username is like Postgres and Postgres @123. No, this is for fraud. We need to use it for, let's say here, for Postgre, because we have used Postgre as a user and Postgre @123 as a password at the time of Postgre installation. So we can make use of that. Now we can build it again. You can see the profile QA is activated. So you can see our application is started successfully on port 8083 for this QA profile. Okay. Now what we can do now, we can test it using the same, like first we can test it using the gate. First of all, we can open the our table it here inside. You can see one table is created with customer, and here are the respective columns which we have mentioned. Now what we can do, we can check first if there is any data in the customer table. So you can see there is no data in customer table. Now let us check for the get all customer first. So here, like, our port ID is different for dev QA, which is 8083. Now we need to pass that port for our QA environment, which is like 8083. So we can see the first result is empty because there is no data in database. Let us add one entry. Here we need to change the port 8083, and we can click on save. Now we can see the customer ID is generated with customer ID 1, and this entry is added. So let us add one more entry. Let us say it's a Deepak and it's a Bangalore, and here we can see electronics, and we can add it. So you can, this second entry is created with customer ID 2. Okay, we can cross check by calling the get method, and we can see there are 2 customer object in a list. So same, we can now execute the select query. Now we can see inside Postgre table we have these 2 entries, which is as expected. Now let us go and update the entry for the second record. For second record, we can first copy this object because we need to pass this for patching or updating the object, and the ID, customer ID, we need to pass as an input as well along with the object. So here we are going to update it. Now instead of Deepak, we can say it's an Sunil, and if instead of Bangalore, we can make it as an Chennai, and it's an electronics, so we can make it as an something like HR department, and we can click on send. So we can see the second customer ID is updated successfully with this given data. Now we can cross check it by calling the get method, and we can see the second record is updated successfully. We can verify it once in our database. We can see the record is updated. So this is about the patch method. Now finally we will call our delete method. For deleting the method, just we need to add the customer ID for this port number 8083. We need to use this port, which is for our QA database, Postgres database on QA profile, and we are going to pass this second as an customer ID. We can see the customer ID is deleted. Customer is deleted for customer ID second. Now we can cross check it here. You can see, yes, we can see the second record is deleted, which is as expected. In order to get the particular customer, we can call pass the ID, and we can see we are getting the actual single object for this passed customer ID. So with this, like, we are done with all our CRUD operations for the second profile, which is for QA PostgreSQL. Next we can do like we can set the production profile for our MySQL database. Let me close this and rerun it using our run configuration. Here we can set prod prod profile because we are going to activate this, and we can run it. Node open. Okay. Okay, so we need to add the dialect part it here. So what we can do here for jpa.hibernate, here inside Hibernate we can use like database platform, and for this database platform we can add the dialect part .hibernate dot dialect dot MySQL dialect. You can save it. We can set the prod as a profile which is selected it here. Okay, so here again like something related to the username it is showing. So somehow the username is not correct. So let me cross check it once. So what is the username we have set for our MySQL related? Okay, so username is a root and there is no password. So we are going to use the same root without any password. We can save it. Now we can rerun it. Now we can run as configuration. Here in our new configuration, here is our profile. So here the profile is activated as a prod. So here you can see our profile is activated prod, which is configured for connecting to our MySQL database. Okay. Now the port name we are using is 8084. Now let us check with our APIs by calling this, like for getting all customers. The port name is 8084 and endpoint is customers. We can Click on send. Herein, like, it is giving the empty array, which is as expected because we have not added any customer as of now. So let us add one customer. So we can see the customer with this object or with name Deepak, address Bangalore, and department electronics is added. We can add one more customer, let's say Sandeep, and it's an Mumbai as an address and department as an IT, and let us add it. We can see the second customer is added. We can cross check by calling the get all customers endpoint. We can see there are two entries, which is as expected. Now we can cross check in database as well. So for calling the database, we have this customer master, and we can execute the query like go to SQL. Here we can say select star from customer, so you can see there are two records, which is as expected. We have just added these two, and which is reflecting as expected. Now what we can do, we can go for the patch method. We can copy this second record which we want to modify. Here is patch method, port number is 8084. Here we are going to pass the actual object which need to be modified, and here is our customer ID. We need to pass it. Here we can modify, let's say instead of Sandeep we can say Mac, and instead of Mumbai we can say it's in Paris, and the department is IT. We can say yes, the name is updated successfully, and its address is again updated successfully, which is as expected. Now finally what we can do, we can delete the customer record. For this we are using the port name 8084, and here is the second customer ID, and here is body. We can see the customer is deleted successfully. We can cross check by calling the get method, and we can see here we have only one record in an array because the second record we have just deleted. We can cross verify in database tables, which is for MySQL, and it should show only one record because the second record we have deleted. Yes, it is showing the single record. Now so we can call a particular single customer ID, and instead of array it should show only a single object. Yes, with this, like, we are done with all our points which we have discussed at the start of this video. So as a recap, I will tell you what all things we have done. Like we have created the empty database for MySQL and PostgreSQL because we are going to create the tables on our application startup. So for that we have enabled or set the property like DLL auto, Hibernate DLL auto as an update. With this, it will create the respective tables as per the entity how we have implemented that. For the H2 database, it will create the database and tables as we have mentioned in the properties file. So next, like, we have created Spring Boot application and configured the respective properties for H2 database, MySQL and PostgreSQL. Next, we have created the implemented Crud operations with REST APIs. And finally, we have tested our all profiles for these different databases using Postman, and verified the data in Postman as well as in respective databases. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please like and subscribe the same so that I will come up with more knowledgeable videos. Thank you so much for watching this video.